All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BETONLINE. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am ready to discuss an unfortunate loss for Denver, but also some things that I did enjoy watching, and I think Nuggets fans probably enjoyed watching too. A mini comeback that was staged within that game that came on the defensive end. That I think is notable, and it's why you can't fully give up on this team. You can't give up on where they are, and despite the fact that things don't always feel good, especially I'm going to talk about the struggles against the elite teams, you can't fully give up on them because there is another gear that they can reach, I think, on the defensive end, and we just haven't seen it in full, and that's why things feel a little bit awkward. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about Jokic and Murray. We'll talk about the Russell Westbrook and Christian Braun dynamic that I think is developing for this team. It's neither of their faults. It's just the situation that we are in, that the Nuggets are in, and I think that Denver might have to get creative with some of their solutions, especially if Julian Strawther is out for any period of time. Going to be fascinating to watch. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. As I mentioned, thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope everybody's having a good afternoon. Apologies for being at an abnormal time, an abnormal recording time here. It's going to be different when I record this show going forward. There are things that are working behind the scenes at Mile High Sports that may be shifting some things around. You might see my set change just a little bit. You might see a couple of things be adjusted over the course of that time, but I do want to reaffirm that just because I missed this morning, I'm still very committed to doing this here. And making sure that you guys get the best content as possible delivered straight from me. So appreciate the love, appreciate the support on the podcast. As always, please hit that like button, that subscribe button if you enjoy, and we will get into it all. But first, I got to pay some bills. This podcast, as you know, is brought to you by the good folks over at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with a large selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. Make sure to tap in, check out what they're doing. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, going to be an interesting show. I have some things and some numbers that I want to go over in the second segment. Maybe we'll do three. Maybe we should do three segments, I'll say. But first, we should absolutely be doing what happened in that Boston game. Just everything that's sort of happening here. It's going to be fascinating to see the fallout of this particular game. Denver loses 110-103. They lose, and it felt worse in the moment, and then they made a comeback, and it looked like they had an opportunity to win towards the end. One play here, one missed opportunity there, another basket on the other end, and the game was over. And it sucks because Denver did try. Christian Braun played the entire second half. Nikola Jokic played really well. Jamal Murray showed out and was fantastic in that second half. But I do think that there are some things that can be gleaned from that game that were very positive. Jamal Murray looked pretty whack at the beginning of that game, just not necessarily fully engaged, firmly just willing to go through the motions. And then there was this defensive possession that happened where he was isolating against Jason Tatum, and Tatum and him were both staring down the referee. No foul was called, but Tatum definitely was chirping at Murray, and it felt like at that moment, they were just going at him on a consistent basis. And then the second half game plan for the Celtics was to isolate Murray over and over and over again, try to tire him out, try to go at him. And it didn't work. And he actually stepped up to the table, I thought, extremely well And then on the other end, he had 22 points and 6 assists in the second half alone. He was great. He was dynamic. He did a lot of great things. And was he perfect? No. There were some plays that he made and some plays that he didn't make that I think definitely helped Denver, or he hurt Denver at some points. But it just goes to show that he does have that gear, and he continues to have that gear and that ability to kind of move it up, like elevate a little bit more. And in this particular matchup, yes, the Celtics are going to target him because they've got two big wings. But if they're going to ISO, okay. Mike Weisberg says it here. It worked pretty well, Ryan. JB cooked Murray in the post pretty consistently. Jaylen Brown was 6 of 15 from the field and 2 of 4 from 3. He was 4 of 11 from 2. He was 8 of 9 from the free throw line, which that could be part of it. And he had 5 turnovers. Jason Tatum had 6 turnovers. He was also 4 of 15 from the field and 1 of 7 from 3. Those guys were not at their best. They clearly weren't. And I'm just going off of the numbers, man. Like, if they are going to go through him, they're going to score on occasion. But Denver defended well enough, especially in that second half, to get back into that game. That was perfectly fine. And Denver got away. Like, I thought that Boston got away from the process that they were doing really well. Like, they got baited into it over and over and over again. When Derek White was shooting, when Peyton Pritchard was shooting, when Al Horford was shooting, and when they were just running standard pick and roll and trying to space Denver out and put them into different actions, like, that was way better for the Celtics. Denver couldn't handle that. But when they slowed it down and isolated and allowed everybody else to rest, that was better. Boston nearly got caught doing exactly what they were trying to do. They were just trying to prove a point to Jamal, I think. And it nearly cost them the game. But Denver still ultimately lost, and Boston was still better. That's why I have this up top on the banner up there. The Celtics are better than the Nuggets. There's no question about that. Even with Aaron Gordon out, even with Peyton Watson out, even with other guys that Denver had out, obviously Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis were not available for Boston. So there's a big, there's multiple players that were absent from this game, but I still think that Boston and their formula, like, they are better than the Nuggets right now. And what they showed was that Jokic and Murray, they can't do it alone. Jokic had 20 points, 14 rebounds, 9 assists, ho-hum, nothing crazy. Had a couple assists, or a couple turnovers, excuse me. Shot 9 of 15 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3. Shot 0 of 0 from the line, which, to me, again, like, this is ridiculous. I noted this in my article that went out today. This was Jokic's 15th time, I believe. It was either 14th or 15th, where he had at least 15 shot attempts and 0 free throw attempts. There are other guys that do that more, but there are other guys that have absolutely not gotten a good whistle as well. But you're starting to get up into rarefied air when you do that consistently, when you're as aggressive as Jokic, and when you're a center who is in the paint as often as he is. Especially like the image of him bleeding and gushing blood yesterday. Like, it just happens too often for him to get 0 free throws. And I'm often a guy that talks about how Jokic tries to fade away on some shots. He doesn't try to go through a bunch of people. But when you're getting grabbed to the point that you're bleeding, I'm not going to no Nuggets fan is going to ever sit by at that point. Like, it's just, at that point, it just becomes egregious. But either way, the way that the Celtics guarded him, they were absolutely not going to let Jokic beat them. It was very reminiscent to the way that the Lakers guarded him, where they sent 2 or 3 players to him at the same time, and they funneled the ball in the direction, not of Murray, not of Porter, but to Christian Braun and Russell Westbrook. And the way that that ultimately manifested was Christian Braun taking a career high in shot attempts. He had 22 shots. His career high was 19, and that wasn't even this year. Like, his career high was set last year. The most shot attempts that Christian Braun has had in a game this year was 15, which is actually kind of insane when you think about it. But Christian 10 of 22 from the field, not a super efficient night. 2 of 8 from 3, certainly not efficient on that front. Did have 4 steals and a block, did have 3 assists, did have 6 rebounds. I thought he played a really good game defensively. But offensively, this was the game plan for the Celtics. It was to guard Jokic with 2 people. It was to stay attached to Murray and Porter. And it was to split the difference between Christian and Russ with 1 player. And one of those guys was often open. And so that's where the ball often found its way, because Jokic is an unselfish player. Murray's an unselfish player. Porter even did the same thing on a possession. And there are plenty of opportunities for those guys in particular to crush this defense. Denver has to find a way to punish that kind of defense. And Aaron Gordon's done a really good job this season of making that happen, because he's shooting 42% from 3. His actual willingness to shoot those shots is a lot higher. And that, I think, makes a lot of sense to a degree. Russell Westbrook is a little bit different. Christian Braun is a little bit different. You go to per 100 possessions for 3-point attempts, Christian Braun is at 3.8 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. That is really low. To put into perspective how low that is, it's the 3rd lowest on the team, and only DeAndre Jordan and Vlatko Čančar are any lower. And Vlatko, I think, has played Vlatko's played 4 games, and he's played 34 minutes. So it really is like the 2nd lowest on the team. Christian does not want to take threes. He doesn't want to. It's just not something that he enjoys doing. Russell Westbrook is more than willing to take threes, as we've seen, but he's only shooting 32.5%. And so when he shoots 2 of 8 from 3, which I believe that's what the number was. Let me just go back and check. Yes, 2 of 8 from 3. They both shot 2 of 8. Christian, because he was uncomfortable, I think, taking that many shots. Russ, because he's not a good 3-point shooter. Those are 2 important dynamics that the Nuggets have to figure out. I think, and Himmis says it here, I firmly agree. I'm pretty comfortable, or Himmis says, I'm pretty confident that CB will be a good shooter in the future, TBH. And I agree. Like, that's how I feel about this. It's why I think that he should continue shooting in this situation. I think that Denver should be trying to get him to a place where he is more than comfortable letting fly 6 threes in a game as a shooting guard. And if he's never comfortable enough to do that, then this is always going to be an issue. Think about what's happened with Lou Dort in Oklahoma City. Lou Dort at this current moment is shooting 39.5% from 3. In his career, he's at only 35.5%, but these last 2 seasons, he's shooting 39.4 and 39.5. But let me list off the attempts that he's had in his entire career as a 3-point shooter. This is Lou Dort, who was not known as a 3-point shooter. In his rookie season, 2.8. Second season, 6.3. Third season, 7.7. Fourth season, 5.5. Last year, 5.0. This year, 5.6. Lou Dort, more than willing to take those shots. More than willing to, I think, work his way out of being a liability as a perimeter jump shooter. In his career, Christian Braun so far, 1.3, 2.0, and as a full-time starter, 2.7. So this is the issue. This is the issue that you have with both playing Christian Braun and Russell Westbrook at the same time. Those guys are, like, Christian is a very choosy shooter. He wants, like, he's only going to do it in a good place. He's only going to do it when he is in a comfortable spot, or he's forced to. Those are the only 2 recent scenarios. And he hasn't worked through the part of his game yet where he's being asked and dared to shoot those threes on a consistent basis and being forced to make them before a team adjusts. Lou Dort, somebody who's done that over the course of, like, again, it's 6 years, 7 years. Like, that's how long it takes these guys, and oftentimes. Christian is so much better than Lou Dort at driving inside the arc and working off of Jokic. And it's kind of a cheat code in that way. You can get lulled into that sense of security by just doing that on a consistent basis. But as I have talked about, Denver is going to struggle against these elite teams and these elite defenses when they run into them, because teams are going to know that you have to cut off the paint. And Christian is going to have to find some opportunities to affect the game in a positive way if he's not getting to the paint on a consistent basis. Because at that point, if you're just driving into a brick wall, you're not accomplishing anything positive. You're just making things more complicated for the entire team. Russ, it's the same thing, but in a different way. So often, and like part of Russ's issues is not just the shooting, because he knows he's a 17-year veteran. He gets it. He understands that teams are daring him. He knows he has to punish it in order to make them adjust. He's never going to make them adjust because he's a 17-year vet. They know who he is at this point. And fortunately for him, he's shot really well from the corners. He's a horrible above the break shooter this year, which is something that not a lot of people are fully realizing. But he is a great, or at least good, corner three-point shooter. So if he stays there and takes those shots, perfectly reasonable. I won't ever complain about him taking a wide open corner three. He has to do it. It's a requirement. He did airball one in this last game, and I think that you might see him airball or hit the side of a backboard or do some of that stuff in the playoffs as well. That's probably going to happen. The problem that you see when Denver, and I could get into this in the next segment, and I probably should, but when he tries to fit it into a tight window as a passer, trying to thread the needle to Jokic, that's the other thing that teams are really struggling with. All right, well, easy ban from Luka Doncic. Can you imagine which fan base is now crashing the chat? Got it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat a little bit more about some numbers that I have. Some numbers that I have that I compiled prior to that talks about how Denver plays against elite teams. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. All right, let's get into some other things that I've got going on here. Sorry, I've got to pulling something up really quickly on the side. Okay. I've got some numbers. Denver's performance versus elite teams is very notable. I've been the one to talk about this. I've been the one to really push this over the course of this season. And it's something that I started to notice when you're looking at the barometer games, you're looking at the measuring stick games, the ones that you're trying to see, okay, how good is this team actually? What can they do? Because Denver has had some games where they've screwed up against some of the dregs of the NBA, like Washington, like New Orleans, like Portland. And Portland, actually, in retrospect, not that bad of a loss because of where they are now. But Denver's had another couple of those where kind of shaky losses. But the ones that stand out to me more are when Denver just does not look good enough against these elite teams, these top 10 teams in the NBA. So I went in and I broke down some numbers. The current top 10 teams in the NBA outside of Denver, Denver's 6th, I'm including the 11th best team. OKC, Cleveland, Boston, Memphis, New York, Houston, Minnesota, the Lakers, Dallas, and then the Clippers at 11. Those are your elite teams. First of all, 8 of those teams are on the Western Conference, and that doesn't include Denver. Actually, I'm sorry. Denver is the 11th team in that case. 7 of those teams that I just mentioned are in the West. and then 3 are in the East, and they're the clear 3 best teams in the league. Denver, I think, given this road trip that they were just on, pretty clear to see how much of a gap there is between teams like Boston and then teams like Milwaukee, Indiana, and Detroit. Milwaukee's like in that halfway gap because they have Giannis, because if he's an unstoppable player and if Denver doesn't perform well against some of those other role players, then they have a capability of losing. But Detroit, Indiana, it's not really close. Like those teams are not in that same tier as I think Nuggets fans can fully agree with based off of what they've just seen. But here we go. Net rating, offensive rating, and defensive rating versus each of those top 10, middle 10, and bottom 10 teams. Overall, Denver's net rating is 6th versus top 10 teams. It drops to 14th versus middle 10 teams. It's up to 2nd, and versus bottom 10 teams, it's at 11th. More on that in a bit. Offensive rating. Denver's offense overall is 2nd in the NBA. This is according to Cleaning the Glass, by the way. These are the numbers that I go to. They eliminate garbage time. I love these. I think they're the best number set that you can go to. Overall, Denver has the 2nd best offensive rating, but versus top 10 teams, that drops to 10th. Versus middle 10 teams, they're 1st. Versus bottom 10 teams, they're 3rd. And then defensive rating. Overall, Denver is 20th. Versus top 10 teams, Denver is 20th. Versus middle 10 teams, Denver is 9th. Versus bottom 10 teams, Denver's 28th. So a couple notes there. The most important numbers in that set, in my opinion, is Denver's offensive rating versus top 10 teams and Denver's defensive rating versus bottom 10 teams. We'll start with the defensive rating first because that's easy to explain away. Versus bottom 10 teams, Denver just doesn't focus. They don't have the same level of focus and engagement and killer instinct. And there are too many times where Denver just assumes that they're going to win, and then they don't actually focus up and bring the max effort, and they look worse than they are. That's pretty easy to explain away. You see that a lot of times with good teams. Denver's never been a team that defends well against those bottom 10 teams because they don't take it seriously enough. Now, Denver's offense in those cases is really good because it's really easy to score against bottom 10 defenses, bottom 10 teams. They don't have much to play for. They don't have much to really go all out for. They don't have enough talent to make it consistent. So it's not surprising that Denver's really good offensively versus those teams. It's also not surprising that Denver's really good on either end of the floor against the middle 10. And the reason why I say that is because the offense that Denver runs is a tried and true strategy against most teams. There are some teams that you have to kind of adjust for and some players that you have to adjust for. But for the most part, Denver can score by just attacking the paint relentlessly. And they have done that. They've done a really good job of that overall. And then defensively, Denver blows out some of those teams because in a lot of those cases, they take them seriously because they know that they're not bottom 10 teams. They know they have to try a little bit harder. They know that this is a situation where they have to try, but then that moment of effort actually pushes them a lot farther than you would think it does. Because the middle 10 is not the top 10. The top 10 teams in the NBA, Denver has a defensive rating that is parallel to their overall rating, which makes sense to me. And they have an offense that drops. And that offense that drops makes a lot of sense too. Denver's 10th in offensive rating versus those top 10 teams. Now, it is important to mention that Jokic hasn't played in all of those games. Like games like the 2 Memphis games, Houston. There was a Boston game that he missed. There's another couple of games that he's also missed. One of them was against New Orleans. Another, I think, was against another top 10 team, if I'm not mistaken. So Denver's going to look worse statistically because of some of the games that Jokic has missed. However, even in the games that Jokic has played, Denver's offense is not as good because those top 10 teams know how to win. They know how to adjust. They know how to instill a game plan. And the game plan against the Nuggets, as I've mentioned before, is to cut off the darn paint. Don't let them get there. If you don't let the Nuggets get there, then they're not going to hurt you. If you don't let Jokic get there, he's worse. He's worse as a player. And that's like not his fault, because the way that they do that is they throw 3 bodies at him. They throw 3 people at him at the same time. They say, hey, anybody else, shoot the ball. Like that's a pretty good game plan, a pretty good strategy for a team that relies so often on Jokic creating great shots for Denver, especially near the rim. If he doesn't create great shots near the rim, then what he's doing is creating average to good shots on the perimeter, especially based off of the personnel that Denver does have. So this is the problem. This is the problem that Denver's running into. I've mentioned this before. The Nuggets are 32-7 against teams when the Nuggets have 54 points in the paint or more. That's a crazy number. 54 points, first and foremost, is really high. If they just put that as their average, I think it would lead the NBA or be very close to it. 30, that's just 54. That's the cutoff. If they are under 54 points, 53 or fewer, Denver is 7-15. 7-15. The Nuggets do not have another way to win. And that's the problem. That when teams cut off plan A, when they make it harder for teams like, or for players like Jokic, for players like Gordon, for players like Christian Braun, and players like Russell Westbrook, those guys that really excel around the rim, that really make the most of their experience around the rim, then Denver's up a creek, because they don't have enough guys that can do their damage on the perimeter, or sometimes even more important, in the mid-range. Like, how many times have you cringed when Russell Westbrook fires up that bank shot from 15 feet? How many times have you scratched your head when Christian Braun throws up a floater? Or when, even hell, Julian Strawther throws up a floater. I know that he's making them at a relatively high rate, Julian Strawther, but that's not a good shot in comparison to a 65% shot at the rim, because it's a 45% shot. It's a little different. And then Mike, he's not shooting as well from mid-range either. So it's a very uncomfortable place. And Denver right now is going through this identity crisis, where when they face these good teams that cut off plan A, that take away their fastball, how do you respond? How do you get from point A to point B in one piece if you can't do what you're most comfortable with? And Denver, between now and the end of the regular season, has to figure that out. They have to figure out what they can do and what their strategy is going to be against these teams that are cutting off the paint. Because I got to tell you, the Lakers, that one was on national TV and everybody saw it. Everybody also saw this game against the Celtics where Denver scored 103 and Jokic only scored 20 points because he couldn't score more than 20 points. Because every time he touched the ball within 12 feet of the basket, he was seeing 3 people right in his grill. So the Nuggets are in a tough spot. And that's because of the personnel that they have. Michael Malone has done an excellent job, I think, of adapting what he's needed to adapt in order to get the Nuggets to a really great offensive place against 70% of the NBA. But it's that final 30% that either A, he can't do, or B, he has foregone because it's too difficult. Denver, there's some, given the way that Zeke Naji has played lately, given the way that Jalen Pickett has played lately, there's some criticisms that I think are completely fair for Malone. And he has put them into a box at this point of trying this specific thing. Now, to be fair, He has also said, I want us to shoot more threes. I want us to shoot more threes. I want us to shoot more threes. But I think he's also kind of getting to a place where he's working with what he has, what he believes will be successful. And yet, like, I'm not sure that it's the right call. I'm not sure that he's doing the best job right now with these particular matchups. And so we'll have some questions. Nobody is safe. The only guy who's safe is Jokic. Nobody is safe at this point. And as like Jokic will get his criticism because he is the best player in the world and because he is the guy that the straw that stirs the drink and should be able to make, like, you're making a shit salad out of shit, if you will. That's underselling what he has to work with. But I do think that Denver's kind of backed into a corner and they're going to try to hit, like, they're like a rhinoceros trying to go through, like, and go through a brick wall. They're going to try to go through it. They're not going around it. They're not finding another solution. This team is going to put their head through the wall. And if they can be successful at it, then they'll win a championship. But there's too many holes in that logic. And I think that there's going to be a team, whether it's the Lakers, whether it's a team in the East, whether it's the Minnesota Timberwolves like it was last year, that realizes, hey, what if we pack the paint? That's going to be tough. All right, let's take another break. When we come back, I have a solution that I think we should discuss about this. We will be right back. But first, I think I have a read that I'm supposed to be doing here. I thought I did. It was supposed to be here. Yeah, it was supposed to be here, but it is oh, here we go. I don't have the overlay, but we do have a new sponsor. SCL Mortgage. SCL Mortgage, they are a new sponsor that is working with us here at Mile High Sports. I'm very excited to read for them. Are you looking for a great mortgage company that you can trust? With hundreds of happy customers and a 5-star reputation, contact our friends at SCL Mortgage. Call 303-790-2222 or visit myspecialmortgage.com. They have helped hundreds of people just like you to achieve their dreams. SCL specializes in assisting people with unusual financing needs, as well as those with great credit. Make sure to check them out and let them know that you came from us here at Mile High Sports. Again, that is 303-790-2222 or visit myspecialmortgage.com. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. Segment Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I know a lot of people think I'm a downer, and I understand that, believe me. Like, I generally just, with everything that I do, I'm reactionary a little bit in the moment, but a lot of it is based off of the picture of things that I have in the long term. And I think that this was coming. I saw this coming at the beginning of the season, and there were some opportunities for Denver to kind of fall apart a little bit, but they held it together. And Jokic, like, is playing better than he ever has, and that is a big reason why. Like, Christian Braun and, like, Jamal Murray's turned it around, and there have been elements to this team that have made a lot of sense and have they've figured out, they've coalesced, and then it's made it happen. But I continue to see issues and have seen issues for a while. It's one of the reasons, and people have noted it in the comments. I won't pull it up, but the Zach LaVine thing, like, I don't know. Like, I understand why folks were critical of that idea, and it might still have been the wrong idea. But I think you can kind of see, especially with where Denver struggles, when they're struggling with ball pressure, when they're struggling with spacing, when they're struggling with various other things, you can see why somebody like Zach LaVine might have been a positive. But that ship has sailed, and I shouldn't talk about it extensively. We should talk about who this group is now, what they can accomplish, what they can do better, and where they can get to this place, where they can get to a place where you can think that they can win a championship. Because they're still third in the West. The Lakers have passed them, barely. I still don't think the Lakers are a better team than the Nuggets. I think they've had a relatively easy strength of schedule, and they're in a position where they are in the honeymoon phase of where they are. And it's easy to be in a honeymoon phase when you've got Luka Doncic and LeBron James, and you have a bunch of guys that are willing to buy in. And they might win it. They might be better than Denver. I just don't think that they are. I think that Denver will figure it out. So we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But here's one of the solutions that I have. And it's something that I wrote about a little bit earlier today. I think that the Nuggets should be playing Peyton Watson at the shooting guard position. I think that they should be really trying to emphasize him when he comes back. Little Birdie told me that Peyton Watson could be back sooner than later. And he is in range on his return and feeling pretty good. If that is the case, and if he's ready to go, I think the Nuggets, the most important thing that they can do between now and the end of the season is to try to get Peyton Watson ready. Don't Tell Santa Cruz asks, what would your starting lineup be then? It's not with Peyton Watson in the shooting guard spot. That I will say. It's with him playing over Julian Strawther. And Julian, I think, he had an injury in this last game. He is still somebody that Denver should be considering part of their future. But we are now at that stage of the season where you have to start figuring out who's in your playoff rotation. Who are the guys that you trust? And I think that, I would still start. Here's what I would start. Murray, Braun, Porter, Gordon, Jokic. Like, that's the starting group that I would still have. I think that Braun is still a very important piece to this thing. He's a steady option, but he doesn't have to play 45 minutes a game in the playoffs. He could play 25. He could play 30. He could play whatever. What I think is more important than that, if you watched this last game against the Celtics, you will see that Denver was fantastic defensively in the second half. I'm not kidding. 102 defensive rating against the Celtics and a 95 defensive rating in the minutes when Jokic was on the floor. In the minutes when DJ was on the floor at the beginning of that fourth quarter, they had a 137 defensive rating. Cut that. That's not what I'm talking about. The part when Jokic was on the floor, they were actually guarding. They were doing really well. Murray was making plays. Christian was making plays. This is not a denigration of Christian. But I think where Denver needs to get to is they need to come up with a situation where they get more size and physicality and defense into their rotation on a consistent basis. And what that means to me is playing your best defender. And I think that Peyton Watson is your best defender. He's your most impactful, athletic, a guy that you can trust to guard on the perimeter. He's your best at getting around screens. He's your best at rear view contests. He's the guy that I think makes it easier for Michael Porter, for Nikola Jokic, and for Jamal Murray. I like the idea of Murray, Watson, Porter, Gordon, Jokic. And that kind of takes out Braun in that case. This isn't the starting lineup. This is a functioning other unit. But that's the way that you get an elite defender on the floor while also having the offense that you need. And if your defense, or if your offense is already going to be at a disadvantage with somebody like Christian Braun out there, if you're playing Christian Braun and Aaron Gordon at the same time, the spacing issues are going to be there. Like Murray's he's gonna have a lot of pressure on him. Jokic will have a lot of pressure on him. Porter will have a lot of attention. Gordon can shoot, but again, he's not a true spacer. Christian's not either. And Peyton is actually, he's shooting a higher frequency of shots from 3-point range than Christian is. And that to me matters because he's got a willingness to shoot those. Christian is at 3.8 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, as I mentioned earlier, shooting 36% from three. Peyton Watson is the same frequency, 3.9. He's only shooting 34%. What is the difference if neither of those guys will be guarded? You're still getting the same thing offensively. Like they're either going to hit them or they aren't. And if he hits 40%, then it's a little bit different. But in this last game, he hit 25%. And there are going to be games in the playoffs where he shoots 0%, where he shoots 20%, where he shoots 1 of 6 and shoots 16%. So you might as well put your best defender out there in that spot. Your guy that you believe could impact the most on the defensive end. And so what I propose is that he's not starting. But I think that the bench group that Denver should go with for the rest of the season is Russell Westbrook, Jalen Pickett, Peyton Watson, Zeke Naji, and DeAndre Jordan. Those 5. And I think you should try to play 10. And I think that Julian Strawther has to be out. His defensive issues are too much of an issue. Jalen Pickett is also a decent defender, and he can shoot. He can space. And so in those bench minutes, yes, Peyton Watson will be playing the 3. That's his more natural position. It's not the 4. It's the 3. But you're going to get more opportunities with that group because Jalen doesn't need to play 15 minutes a game. He needs to play 6 or 8 or 10. Russell Westbrook is going to be your backup point guard, and you're going to play him next to Murray at times. But I don't think you should be playing him more than about 24 minutes a game. I think you should be at the 20 to 24 range. As I said, preseason, because your boy knows some stuff. But with Peyton, if you can get to more lineups, and this is not just him at the 2, but this is him being comfortable enough to play the 3 as well. I saw some lineups pop up from Don't Tell Santa Cruz earlier. Murray, Braun, Watson, Gordon, Jokic. There's your defensive lineup. There's your group. That's the group that you need to play because Murray and Jokic should be able to carry you for the majority of that time offensively. Gordon can operate in the dunker. If not, then it's Watson. And Braun and Watson and Gordon is your defensive trio. I don't actually know how many minutes Denver has played that group so far this season. Let me look it up. Be patient with me really quickly. I want to see how many minutes that Denver has played that Murray, Braun, Watson, Gordon, Jokic lineup. Let's see, Watson. Let's see, Braun. And let's see, Gordon. Okay, we're going to add this a little bit. Gordon. Five minutes. That group so far this season has played 5 total minutes. Murray, Braun, Watson, Gordon, Jokic. It's a -8 in 5 minutes. So it might be bad. Like they've shot 2 total threes in 5 minutes. They're 1 of 4 from the free throw line. They have not played enough, but they've also not played enough to really give a massive indication of how good or bad they can be. And I think at this point, Denver needs to find ways to get creative. The way that they're playing right now, as I outlined in the second segment, the way that they are playing right now, they're going to lose against these top 10 teams because their offense is not good enough. It's 10th. And their defense is 20th against these top 10 teams. More than that, they have the 10th ranked half-court defense in the Western Conference. The teams below them are Utah, Phoenix, New Orleans, Sacramento, and San Antonio. Sacramento is the only play-in team at 9th. Denver has the worst half-court defense of any of the Western Conference playoff picture right now. Now, they compensate that by having the best half-court offense. So I think think you can take away some of that half-court offense, make it a little bit worse in order to get better defensively. Because I think the gap between somebody like Michael Porter and Peyton Watson on the defensive end is significant. Is it significant enough to bench Michael Porter in those cases? No. But you need to come up with some creative solutions. You need to find more ways to impact the defense, to play more defensive guys. And I just tend to think that as great as Porter has been for much of this season, he really struggled in this last game. As great as Russell Westbrook has been at times this year, his flaws on both ends of the floor will stand out. The same can be said for Julian Strawther, of course, even more so. It's why I kind of have him benched at this point. I just think that Denver needs to find more time to get more defenders out there. Because right now they're working up a creek without a paddle, trying to play good defense without the right defensive personnel. So, look, they've got an upward battle. We've seen this. We knew this. They've got to find some ways to get some radical solutions in here. And I think the best one, at least from my perspective, is to see if Peyton Watson is ready for playoff basketball. If he is, you might be cooking with gas. All right, folks, that is going to do it, I think, for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll. I hope you enjoyed. I try not to be a downer all the time, but I do try to provide solutions. I try to provide options, try to provide some reasons for optimism. Whether Michael Malone and the Nuggets are going to be willing to take that, whether they're going to be willing to try some of these things, no idea. But I do think that the most important thing that they can do is not fall into the habit of just bashing their head against the wall with one solution. They've got to find some more. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.